Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today. I'm here to have a really interesting discussion with my colleague, Claire Zangerle, and we are talking today about some of the challenges in nursing that they originated a long time ago. They were especially pronounced during COVID, and they persist today because of a lot of the changes in the workplace. And so we're here to talk about the struggles that staff are facing in terms of day-to-day workload management, self-care, the challenges inherent in nursing, and how they all come together to potentially set the stage for burnout, which is a major concern, and how we work together to provide a program for staff that really was very pivotal in turning the situation around, teaching key skills for managing day-to-day challenges, day-to-day productivity, and day-to-day self-care to have a really significant impact on the quality of life of staff in hospitals. We're talking about hospitals today, and how important that is from a leadership standpoint in terms of employee retention and continuity. So welcome, Claire, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me. This is a very important topic, and I'm excited to talk about it.
I know you are especially passionate about it, and I really admire and respect your commitment to this topic. And that's why I wanted to have this time to talk today. So, you will do a much better job than I will in terms of explaining all your credentials and background. So, tell us a little bit about the work that you've done, and then we'll talk more about the specific program.
Sure. Well, I've been a nurse for 35 years. About 25 of those years, I've been a nurse leader and a nurse executive. And what that means is I worked in direct patient care for a while, and then I evolved into leading nurses who were working in direct patient care, either in an acute care hospital or in home care or in an ambulatory setting. And we've always had in my nursing career, we've always had some semblance of a frontline direct care nursing shortage. Of course, it was exacerbated during the pandemic, and we saw nurses not necessarily leaving the profession, but leaving acute care nursing, where that direct care was very important. My focus is on those nurses that are taking care of those patients in the health systems where I've worked and served as a nurse executive. But what has really come and bubbled to the top is our frontline nurse leaders, those nurse leaders who are leading their teams in those acute care areas, and how they manage their time, because they have so many demands on their time, not just from their staff and from the patients that they're responsible for, but from all the ancillary things that are going on. They have to make sure the quality and safety of the area is within check. They have to have an eye on supplies. They have to have an eye on finance. They are essentially the CEOs of the areas that they manage. And being able to manage all of that, plus being able to be there for their employees, is truly a struggle. And during the pandemic, I saw this as something that was foundationally wrong in their nursing leadership practice. So you and I met through another social media influencer, Beth Roy, which that's the beauty of the socials, I think, is that you get all these great connections. And I took your time management course for myself personally, because although I've always used a planner, back in the day, it was the Franklin planner, and then it's just evolved into different things. And there's so many choices out there. I was somewhat overwhelmed with how do I manage all of the things that I have going on when I was working on my doctorate degree, when I was working full time, those types of things. So I had the opportunity to just take your time management course, and it resonated so much with me. I thought I was managing my time well, and then you taught me how to do it even better. And that was just something that I thought, you know what, this is something wonderful that I could bring to the nurse leaders of my organization. because one thing I can't give them, I can give them all the support in the world. I can look for resources for them financially, that type of thing. I could not give them time. And what I heard during the pandemic and how they were very much frustrated was, I am giving so much time. I don't have time for myself. I don't have time for my family. And this didn't stop when the pandemic abated. This just continued because all the things we piled on our nurse leaders at the front line during the pandemic have not necessarily been taken off of their plates because they've managed it so well. So I remember approaching you kind of nervous about it, thinking, okay, will she even be interested in this? Um, would you help? Would you help create a time management program specific for nurse leaders? Because you can give somebody a generic time management program and it could be absolutely foundational for their skill set, and it could help them. But I thought there is such unique work around what a frontline nurse manager does, and it was so much fun educating you about what a nurse manager does, and based on your skill set and where you worked before, and you worked in an acute care setting and you knew some of that, but just actually sharing with you some of the things that are happening with our frontline nurse managers. You were gracious enough to say, let's just develop something specifically for this cohort of the professional world.
Let me jump
And
in for a moment and provide just a
yeah.
little bit of context for people who don't know me. So I echo some of the key things that you have said. So you and I met randomly through a mutual acquaintance on social media, which is just remarkable because we have formed such a great partnership and we have done really great work together and enjoyed a great friendship along the way as well. And none of this would have happened if we hadn't crossed paths. So I'm so appreciative that we did in this unique way. My training is I'm a psychologist and I'm a health habit coach. I've been in the field for over 2 decades. I've worked in both academic medical settings and private practice. So as you're saying, I know what it's like to work in a hospital. I know what it's like to work in an academic medical setting. And I know some of the demands. I didn't know the demands specific to nursing, but I knew the demands that are unique to working in a medical setting. And my particular area of expertise was working with adults with ADHD who have difficulties managing day-to-day tasks, struggling with feeling overwhelmed, getting lost in distractibility, managing motivation to finish tasks. And so I've been doing that kind of work for many years and have developed programs using what we call cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a skills-based approach to helping people learn more about patterns and create changes in day-to-day life. And then I brought that to the world of social media and took the work I had done with patients with ADHD and realized that it's not just these patients that need help with this, it's everyone. And so I created an online program that I've been teaching for the past several years for the general public using these skills that I know have worked with the patient populations. And so that's the program that you referenced that you decided to take with me. And I have to just mention, I mean, you are someone who is clearly accomplished. I can't even list all of your degrees and the accomplishments and the incredible work that you have done. And you were surprised to find that even though you were managing your time well and clearly getting things done and advancing your life and advancing the work that you were in charge of, there was still more to learn. And you were really kind of surprised to see that there were even better ways of doing things and ways to become more efficient and feel better about how day-to-day flow is going. So that's a little context of the work that you and I had done together. And then, as you were saying, we put our heads together. You taught me a little bit more about the challenges that were specific to nurses and nurse managers. And we created this program that would be tailored to them, that would speak their language and addressed some of those unique challenges. And so let's see, is there anything else you want to say about what you were seeing with your team? It was a very difficult time. This was right in the height of COVID. This was 2020 when we put this program together, and nurses were bearing the brunt of so much that was difficult at that time when COVID was at its height. And it was such a difficult field to work in. And I really, you know, I saw this in your leadership style, and I've always felt that this is so unique that you really care about your leaders and you saw the struggles and you were really thinking, what can I do to help them? You can't reduce the workload all the time. Certainly couldn't make COVID go away and make those challenges go away. But you thought if we can help make day-to-day functioning feel better, then
Mhm.
that could make a difference. And so I know, you found the budget. We don't have to go into the details of how you did that, but I think it was pretty creative. You found the budget to do this, which is not always easy to do. And what was the reaction when you told your team that you were going to offer this? What was the reaction that you got from them?
Well, it was recognition that number one, that they were glad that I realized how stressed they were. And, you know, what we all said was, there's always going to be chaos. And no matter what industry you're in, there could be peaks and valleys of chaos. But is there a way to control your own chaos and leave at the end of the day and feel accomplished? Because what I was hearing from them when I talked to them about it, that was, you know, we get there at 6:30 in the morning, we leave at 6 at night, and we don't feel like we got anything done. And that is very demoralizing for them. So when I talked to them about this, I said, look, this is what it did for me. I can't give you time, but I can give you the tools to manage your time based on my experience with this. There was a little skepticism around it because they said, well, our workload is not going to change. I said, yes, but I can promise you that the way you manage your workload and your prioritization of that and setting boundaries and thinking about yourself sometimes, which they don't do, will make a big difference in your mental health. Because I was seeing burnout in those nurse leaders, to an alarming degree. We had done a clinician wellness survey separate from this, and seeing some of the, they weren't prioritizing hydrating. They weren't drinking water. They weren't taking bathroom breaks. They weren't taking meal breaks, things like that. So when we talked about time management, I said, this is something for you. So once they got through the skepticism, and I think what helped them get through the skepticism is we asked them about their job. You did a pre-survey with them and said, tell me what is your biggest frustration. And that pre-survey was great because it helped frame how you were going to approach the whole instruction piece, and what you were going to focus on. And then what we knew is after they took the course, were we going to see anything different? I think that was the secret sauce of this whole thing. The
Yeah,
pre-test
it was
and
really
the
important to
post.
have the data to
Mhm.
do that pre-course assessment and like you said, communicate that we see these challenges and this is specifically what we are going to address and we're going to measure how you are doing with them now, and then we will measure at the end. And we really want to know, is this making a difference? So we felt very strongly that collecting that data was an important
Mhm.
part of this. I also want to mention that I can appreciate that, when you first introduce the idea to someone, you say, oh, we're going to offer a time management training. People probably think about what's been around because these have been around forever and ever. You could Google it and you could download a 1 hour webinar from anywhere. And when I set out to create this program, I wanted to make this decidedly different because from what I know about behavioral change, from what I know about habit change, listening to a 1 hour webinar is not what you need to create change. And so my philosophy and my approach is very different, which is that I need to work side by side with people for a longer period of time. It can be in smaller bites, but for a longer period of time to teach the skills and then work side by side to provide the accountability for people to actually put them in place and then help them problem solve and sort of digest it and make adjustments along the way as they are implementing it. So that was really unique, was that this was a 21-day program where we used a combination of learning approaches. So we used blended learning. So some of it was live, some of it was live training via Zoom, but a lot of it was asynchronous. They received a workbook that had one assignment for each of the 21 days, and it was bite-sized. So it was designed, for people who don't have a lot of time. They're not going to sit down and do a half-hour a half hour's worth of work on a course. So it was little sound bites, 10 minutes a day, but over time for 21 days. And then we used a platform, an asynchronous platform where they could communicate with me every single day, and they could share what they were working. They could upload notes from their workbook. They could upload a summary. They could upload a picture. I could comment, provide feedback, answer questions, and they worked together as a cohort. And I have found I've had many cohorts take this program, and what I have found, which is so striking, is the value that they feel in working together and having that opportunity to discuss these challenges with their colleagues, which normally doesn't happen. These are not challenges that people feel comfortable talking about, nor do they have a forum. So simply bringing in an outside person to create a forum where they can discuss this, acknowledge it, validate it, and work together to brainstorm strategies for making it better. That to me is one of the most profound outcomes of this program.
Well, and you
Um,
created that safe space for them to talk about their issues related to their time. And I've done this with you at two organizations, a large academic medical center and a smaller health system that had just a couple of hospitals and some outpatient areas too. And in both situations, that the participants were candid and open, and it was almost cathartic for them to talk about their time management struggles with each other on these calls and the things that they participated in. I think that was huge for them to be able to get that off their chest, talk to each other, and not be judged for the struggles that they had. And then, secondly, I think what was really, really good was the bite-sized micro learnings that they had. And it was every day that they came
mhm.
back for 21 days.
Yep.
They knew they were going to do this. And it was the micro exercises that they did that actually build upon each other. And that's what taught them. And the other thing that we did is we gave them each a planner. Some people use a planner that is online, but we literally gave them a paper planner that you taught them how to use and how to incorporate in their daily lives. And I loved it when I would go to meetings or see them online and they'd be opening their planner, and we branded it the organization. So of course there was some pride in that too. But that too was something I think that was very important. And just seeing them evolve through these 21 days. 21 days isn't a long time,
It's
but boy,
not, yeah.
those micro learnings really, really resonated with them.
It's really not. When you think about, many of those leaders are fairly senior. So they've had many years to establish habits, good habits, not so helpful habits. And it's not always easy to change when you've been doing something the same way for many, many years. It's not always easy to change that. And you're right, 21 days, it's certainly much better than a 1 hour webinar, but it's in the scheme of things, not that much time. And we did see profound change, which I'll talk about in a moment. We'll talk about the data. But I want to say one more thing about the forums and the validation that people express through that. Time management, when you say that, the word, I actually don't love the word, and I'm still searching for a better word that really reflects what we're doing in these programs. The thoughts that people say to themselves about the fact that the work is busy, or they have a big to-do list, or there's something really important coming up, or something unexpected happened and now they have to pivot. Those things are not going to change, but what we say to ourselves about that situation happening is so key. And that was another really key skill that we worked on. And I mean, the teams, their minds were blown. Like they've just never had anyone teach them this kind of strategy. And so realizing that you can actually normalize the fact unexpected things happen. In nursing, it's like nursing's middle name, right? Unexpected things happening. That is the nature of the work. And so when you resist it and see it as something that's detracting from your day, it's a setup for this cascade of negativity. But when you embrace it and say, yes, of course, I set my day up one way, something happened, and now it looks a little bit different. Of course, that is the nature of my job, but I now know how to pivot, and I now know how to reset the priorities and make a plan to move forward and not feel so rattled. That was so significant.
I agree. I agree. And just, and you actually, it was almost like giving them permission to bring their problems to the table and discuss how to work through those. And you're
Exactly.
absolutely right. Time management is, it could be different to every different person. And it, it was so beautiful how they were able to personalize this to themselves, and what looked one way for one nurse leader might have looked different for another nurse leader. So
Yes.
that was a really cool part of it too.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that, that I teach a system and I teach skills, but then everybody can take that and adapt it in a way that works for them. Everybody's personality is different, their day-to-day demands and life and home life and their, the demands of their job might be a little bit different. So you can take the main structure of the system and personalize it and make it work in slightly different ways. So let's talk about the data for a moment.
Okay.
So we have two cohorts that we can reference. And when I look at the data, there are a couple different things that I was looking for. So one was I wanted to know sort of the general perception of, again, we're using this word time management because we haven't quite found a better one, but sort of the general perception of how are you feeling about day-to-day work at the beginning versus at the end. And then to what extent did people actually learn skills and were they actually using the skills on a consistent basis? That was also really important. So in the first cohort that we worked with, this was a very large group. We had 300
Yeah.
first leaders attend this
Yeah.
program. It was a massive cohort. And
Mhm.
we like to talk about the word cloud. So this is just a fun thing that we do at the beginning, just to put the feelings into words of how the leaders as a team were feeling about their day. And some of the words that were predominant at the beginning were busy, chaotic, overwhelming. And then when we do that word cloud again at the end and we see productive, good, like the valence of all those words was just completely different. And so to me, that speaks to the gut feeling that people had about time management. But we have the data. So 62% of the nurse leaders rated their time management strategies as very good, compared to about 30% at the beginning. So we doubled that. 76% felt they got many targeted tasks done by the end of the day, compared to 40%. 58% were using a master to-do list. This is one of the big key skills that I teach. So 58% were using a master to-do list to organize their tasks every day, compared to 26% at the beginning of the course. Leadership development, that was a really big topic that we worked on. And this was something we added into the program specific for the nurse leaders. And 28% felt that their ability to create and implement a leadership development plan was extremely effective, compared to 7% before. And this was really significant because implementing a leadership development plan is a big part of the nurse leader's job. But when you have something that's big and broad and can't be completed in one day, it's going to be completed over months and months, and in fact, years. It can be extremely difficult to manage as a task. And so many people felt like they were floundering. They didn't have a structure. They weren't feeling confident in their ability to create it and keep moving it forward. And we taught them a system and we taught them a structure and how to maintain that as a priority when there are all these other priorities that come up. So that was, because that's such an essential part of the role, that was a really critical piece of this program. Let's see, would you want to add anything else? So, I'll say one more data point. 78% felt they could use a system to address unexpected demands very well, compared to 25% before the course.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean,
yeah.
I think all the data points pre and post were significant to look at, because it number one, it demonstrated that they were active participants,
Mm-hmm.
that they actually participated in each of the exercises. Some exercises resonated more with some than others, which you would understand, because with over the first cohort being over 300 people, we had a diverse group. We had brand new nurse managers who had young families. We had seasoned nurse managers who were empty nesters and had and had finished their education. We had some mid-career people who were going back to school. So we had a broad group of people who all could come together. And I do think that it was the data is super important because it shows us the value of this entire endeavor.
And we should add that one of the things that you requested was that we had breakout sessions. So, so we had, I believe it was
With
3
like
different
cohorts.
cohorts. Yeah. And so what were the, how did you
So
define?
we pulled all the managers at one point, all the managers across the continuum, across the organization came together in one cohort because they had similar time management issues around their duties. And then we had the directors, which was the next level up. And then we had the senior nurse executives, which were the chief nursing officers, which was the next level up. Because as it cascades, each group has to support the group below them, and each group has to answer or report to the group above them. And they have global responsibilities, but they have some local ones as well. So that was very helpful to be able to get them all together across their disciplines.
Yeah, I wish, in future programs, I might think about adding in more of those breakout sessions because I think they were so powerful and such rich conversation flowed from those forums that I think we should definitely do more of that in future
Yeah, for
cohorts.
sure.
I want to go over, so just to talk briefly about the second cohort. So this was a smaller hospital system. We had 52 people in this program, multiple disciplines. So we did have different cohorts and we did the same thing. We had the breakouts as well. And, I want to speak to the habits and the new skills that they reported. So at the end, 31% more participants reported using that to-do list most days or every day. And 15% more reported feeling fairly or extremely able to prioritize their tasks. And then the one that really stands out to me, it has to do with that leadership development plan. So 40% more reported feeling very or extremely confident in their ability to implement a leadership development plan for their team. And that was one of the topics that we did a really deep dive. We talked, very specifically about the skills and the systems, and we had breakout sessions. And so that's one of my observations from the program, that the topics where we were able to really dive deep and have those conversations and have those brainstorming sessions together were the areas where we saw the most improvement in terms of the data. And the other one, the last one that I want to reference, is this ability to manage unexpected changes, because we had so many conversations about this. 27% more reported feeling very or extremely able to adapt to unexpected changes in the daily schedule. And I think that's so important because that is the job.
Yes, their job is disruptions.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. But I also want to point out that after the 21-day course, part of what we were able to negotiate with you was just like when we discharge patients from a hospital, we don't want to forget that they exist. We want to do some follow-up care. And you created a weekly email as quote follow-up care to our participants. And I think this last weekend you sent the last of the 12-week emails, and I was flooded with emails from the participants saying, we just got our last email. Thank you very much for this course. It was, we still use the principles, they're life-changing. So having that 21-day course and then having that quote aftercare to say, okay, how are you applying this? So I think it's almost like weaning them off of the instruction
Right.
to get them to implement these tactics into their everyday life, because it is strategies, it's tactics, it's how you continue it. And again, your expertise, it's habits, and
Right.
have they created habits? And so I was very excited that we were able to build that into the program as well.
I'm so happy to hear that. That's the first time that I'm hearing that. And we added that in. So in the first cohort, we didn't have that. So we added this in for this most recent one. And I'm so happy to hear that. I believe in it so much, from someone who helps people create behavioral change as a career, I know that it's so important. And with my individual therapy clients, that's what we do. We don't just end, we start to wean off and we give them more time in between to work on the skills that we've been working on. And then we check back in and make a little adjustments. And, I say my goal is to work myself out of a job. So it's to impart the skills onto my clients, but I share the responsibility for teaching more in the beginning, and then we gradually shift that responsibility so that they can do it on their own. So I'm so glad that we added that in the most recent cohort, and that it was so well received. I received messages as well,
Oh,
from
good.
people who really appreciated it. And, it's just that little sound bite to say, hey, remember, we have this lesson on this. Are you continuing to use that skill that we worked on? Because you can't change everything all at once. And so I think it was a really powerful addition to the program. So I'll be curious to hear, I know you and I will stay in touch, and I'd love to hear, what you're hearing from the teams as time goes on. There was one story you told me about someone who did the first program, which was now about 4 years ago. And I
Mhm.
think maybe you saw her at a meeting. Do you remember what I'm talking about? And she still had her planner. She continued to order it every year.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I actually there are several people who have continue to have their planners, and when I see them, I've since left that first organization, and I've seen people at professional meetings, and they tell me how much this has really made a difference in not only their professional life, which is what I was targeting with sort of I was stealthily trying to help them in their personal life too, but in their personal lives, they say this has really made a big difference, and I'm able to organize myself to the point where I feel in control, and in control in a good way, not
mhm.
in that they have time to do what they really want to do, and that's what it's about. Because I know that when I left the first organization you work with, I left there about a year ago and found myself for the first time in many years not having a schedule every day. And honestly, that left me as unmoored as having a schedule every day, because I had this time that I had to figure out and I'm one who wants to be productive. And I started getting consulting work and having a bunch of different people to work for as opposed to just one person to work for. I actually went back and took your time management class again as a refresher to say, okay, I need to remember some of these principles. And, it wasn't 100% new stuff, but it was new in my new role of how to look at managing my time again. And that made a huge difference to me because, just because you might have some time doesn't mean you should waste it. And I
Mhm.
didn't want to do that because I knew it was a finite time, that I had a little bit of a sabbatical before I, really started cranking up again. And it was very helpful.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, on two levels. So one, as life changes, whether your job situation changes or your life stage changes, the demands on your day are very different. And so what worked or what was necessary at one point might not always be. And so it is so helpful to go through this and just take a step back. Like anything, when we don't put any thought into it, we just kind of go on autopilot. We're not necessarily working at maximum effectiveness, but anything that you take some time to look at and think about and really become more intentional about, we do better. And so I think it's such a great point. And I have found myself in the same boat as I left my position in the academic medical setting to focus exclusively on consulting. I'm looking at, a totally different way of managing my time. And I have 100% had to use this course on myself. And it's made a huge difference, because it's really hard if you're unemployed, if you're in job transition, or if you become self-employed and there are fewer, there's no one else imposing those meetings in that schedule and it's all on you. It can be a huge challenge. And so this system has absolutely been helpful for me too, to make the most out of every day and to move my goals forward in the way that I desire. So thank you for mentioning both of those things. And thank you, Claire, so much for being with me, for taking the time today to review this tale of really powerful work that we did for, a field that has been through a lot and will continue. And I'm so honored. I really have cherished the time that I've had to work with these very special teams, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for bringing me to them and for your passion in caring for your teams. It makes you an excellent leader, and I have such respect for that. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to bringing it to more teams and working with you in the future, which I'm sure that we will do somehow.
Yep.
So, all right, thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed hearing this presentation. Thank you so much for joining me today. And you can reference the notes below this link wherever you are seeing it. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them and talk to you more about the program and how it might be helpful for your organization. So thanks so much for joining today.